Hello, welcome back to Mrs. Torres' YouTube channel. Today we are going to learn to multiply and divide complex numbers. Let me cover these up. Alright, let's look at number 1. So number 1, we've got 2i times 5 minus 6i. Let's for a second just pretend like our i's are x's. If we had 2x times 5 minus 6x, how would we solve that? We would just distribute the 2x, right? We can do the exact same thing with our imaginary numbers. So we're going to distribute our 2i. So 2i times 5 gives us 10i. 2i times negative 6i gives us negative 12i squared. And then, since we have an I raised to a variable, we've got to think about that pattern, right? The I, negative 1, 1, I 1. I always have to write it down. I can't say it. I don't know why. So I squared is going to be negative 1. So really this is 10I minus 12 times negative 1. Negative 12 times negative 1 is positive 12. So our final answer will be 12 plus 10I. So we can also multiply two binomials. So remember, binomials means we have two terms. When we did this with x's, with variables, we FOILed or we used the box method. Same thing here. I'm going to do the box method. But if you prefer to just FOIL or double distribute, however, whatever way works for you is fine. I think the box method helps you keep your terms organized. So 5 times negative 3 gives us negative 15. 5 times 4i is 20i. 2 times negative 3, or 2i times negative 3 is negative 6i. And then 2i times 4i is going to give us 8i squared. So again, we're seeing that I squared come into play. Remember, that's really just negative 1. So let's rewrite all of our terms. Negative 15, we have like terms here because they both have an I. So 20i plus negative 6i gives us 14i. And then 8i squared, if I squared is just negative 1, really this is 8 times negative 1. So that is minus 8. Then combine like terms, we have negative 15 and negative 8. That gives us negative 23 plus 14i. And that is your final answer there. All right, I want you to pause the video, try this one on your own, and then come back and I'll give you the answer. All right, welcome back. We have 3 terms here. Let's deal with this term outside first. This is kind of like these two problems up here put together. So we're going to distribute our negative 2i just to the first term there, because once we multiply that in, we're done, and then we can worry about the second term there. So we'll get 8i, I'm going to leave it in parentheses, 8i minus 10i squared. And I'm just going to bring down our third term. And now it looks like this, right? We can just use our box method. So we have 8i, and then we have negative 10i squared. Remember, I squared is just negative 1, so really this is negative 10 times negative 1. That is positive 10. And then 1, negative 2i. All right, let's multiply. 1 times 8i is 8i. 1 times 10 is 10. 2i times 8i is negative 16 I squared. And then 10 times negative 2i is negative 20i. All right, let's write it out. So we've got 10. Then we have some like terms here. 8i and negative 20i gives me negative 12i. We've got negative 16 times I squared. I squared is just negative 1. So this is negative 16 times negative 1, which is positive 16. And then we combine like terms. 10 plus 16 is 26 minus 12i. That's it. All right, so that is multiplying. Now let's divide. So we've got a problem that looks like this. Remember when we divided radicals? So that was like 2 over the square root of 5. Remember we couldn't have a square root in the denominator? The same thing goes for imaginary numbers. We want all real numbers in the denominator. So just like over here, how we would multiply by root 5 over root 5 and then rationalize from there, we need to rationalize the denominator here. We want to think about what we could multiply negative 7i by to give us a real number, no imaginary numbers. Well, remember up here, I squared is negative 1. I times I is I squared, right? So we can multiply by I over I. Whenever you have just one term in the denominator with an I, you're going to multiply numerator and denominator by I. Remember, whatever we do to the top, we have to do to the bottom, because really we're just multiplying by 1 here. It's the fancy one that helps us. All right, then we multiply. 3 times I is 3i. Negative 6i times I is negative 6i squared. Negative 7i times I is negative 7i squared. Then we just replace those I squared. So we have 3i times negative 6 times negative 1 and negative 7 times negative 1. Whenever I write my final answer, I'm going to put the real part first and then the imaginary number. That's how we usually write complex numbers. So negative 6 times negative 1 gives me positive 6 plus 3i over positive 7. Now we could also split this up and write it as 6/7 plus 3i over 7. Either one of those answers is correct. This is how you'll normally see me write it, but again, either one is correct. All right, last one here. So we're dividing complex numbers again. But up here, notice how we just had one term, right? It was just negative 7i. Here, we have a real number and an imaginary number. So this is really just an imaginary number. Here we have a complex number. So what we're going to multiply by is called the complex conjugate. The complex conjugate, all it does is change the sign on the imaginary number. So instead of negative 3 plus I, it's negative 3 minus I. So the complex conjugate, you switch the sign on the imaginary number. And that is what we're going to multiply by. And remember, we got to do numerator and denominator. Now, I know this, you're like, how is this going to cancel out the i's? You will see. So now we just have two binomials. Multiply them together. If you want to do the box method, I'm just going to FOIL this time. So we have 8 times negative 3 gives me negative 24. 8 times negative I gives me negative 8i. 3i times negative 3 gives me negative 9i. And 3i times negative I gives me negative 3i squared. And then the denominator, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Negative 3 times negative I gives me positive 3I. I times negative 3 gives me negative 3I. And I minus I gives me negative I squared. Now that we've FOILed, we've just got to combine like terms, simplify everything that we can. So let's combine like terms. We'll get negative 24. We have negative 8 and negative 9i, so that's negative 17i. And then remember, I squared is negative 1, so this is really negative 3 times negative 1, which is positive 3. On the bottom, we have some like terms. Check this out. We have plus 3i and negative 3i. So those just cancel out. So we're just left with 9 and then minus I squared. I squared is negative 1. So minus negative 1, that's the same as adding 1. Just got a few more like terms that we can combine. So negative 24 plus 3 is negative 21 minus 17i over 9 plus 1, 10. So we can write it like that, or again, we can split it up. Negative 21 over 10 minus 17i over 10. Either of those are fine. All right, that's it for today. See you later.